World record holders in Mario Kart World are incredible. Their driving is so clean and precise on each track, giving them big leads over every other player in the game. Getting world records isn't just about driving clean lines though, it is also about pulling off the most difficult shortcuts in the game to save as much time as possible. Today I'm going to go through each track and show you the most difficult shortcut to pull off at world record level, some of which haven't even been implemented into world records yet due to their difficulty. Thanks to Optic and James for their help with the list, now let's get into it. Going in reverse order, Rainbow Road has many difficult shortcuts across the 4-minute run, but there is one towards the end of the track that hasn't yet been done in a world record because it is up there for the hardest shortcut in the entire game. On the turn before the glider in the middle of section 4, you would normally take a tight line and release a couple of super mini turbos around the turn. However, it was found a few months ago you could instead do this. Yeah, you can wall ride on the side of the cloud after charge jumping over the fence. It is pretty insane. Funnily enough, it actually only saves around 1/10 of a second when done optimally, so going for it after over 3 minutes of driving as fast as possible is not yet something world record holders have put themselves through, but one day it will surely happen. A difficult shortcut that was recently implemented into world records is the final wall ride on Peach Stadium. On the last turn of each lap, you can constantly trick on the side of the road to get around the turn rather than just regular drifting. Of course, since the wall is so thin, it is very easy to miss the landing each time you get a trick, making it very impressive that the world record holder Jack has managed to set 3 records using this shortcut on all 3 laps, which turned out to be enough for a sub 2:14 run a few weeks ago. On Mario Circuit, there are a few shortcuts you need to practice quite a bit in order to get them consistently, but there is nothing totally crazy like the previous 2, at least not anything that is actually faster. You can ride the edge of the wall on the left side of the double mushroom shortcut, but I'm fairly sure it's just slower or the exact same speed as going around because the exit is dreadful. The 2 mushrooms you would save by doing it probably aren't even worth it either at world record level, but hopefully I'm proved wrong in the future, you never know. For this video though, I'm going with the charge jump onto the blocks at the end of section 1. It is not insanely hard, but still not easy at all. The release timing of the charge jump is very precise to get the maximum height. Acorn Heights has the easiest shortcut of the video so far for sure. The fastest version of the shroomless off-road shortcut is difficult but very learnable, even for online play. It does get harder to do the less coins you have, so on lap 1 of time trials you may struggle to land on the right wall without hitting the ground as well, but you can get used to it fairly quickly. The key thing to know is how many times you should trick into the left wall before the pole bounce. If you are low on coins, then doing 2 tricks gives you some more distance, but if you have 7 or more you can do 1 trick and will be fine every time. In heavy contrast to that, there is the fastest version of the early gap cut on Bowser's Castle up next, and this one is extremely difficult. Rather than doing any of the standard methods, you can instead get to the end of the rail and trick directly into the arrows, skipping the wall ride entirely. Once again, this is incredibly precise. If you jump a frame too early, you will clip the wall, and if you jump a frame too late, you will miss the arrow. The world record only goes for this on lap 1 at the moment, which I'm sure will change in the future, but it goes to show how difficult it is to pull off. Now for Toad's Factory, there are practically no shortcuts on the track other than the final turn, but that is just a simple off-road cut, so I decided to instead go with the tight line around the Travelator turn just before it. Because you have such little space between the wall and the red Travelator to drive on, it is quite hard to avoid getting slowed down. And even though it isn't a huge shortcut, it is still very impressive to watch the vehicle maneuver in such a tight space, especially considering the world record combo doesn't have a crazy amount of handling. Choco Mountain is an interesting one. There is a mushroom strategy on this track that was found to be faster than the current one used in world records, but it hasn't been implemented yet despite the discovery being made over 3 months ago. This strategy involves going around the normal mushroom shortcut, then doing the Superman shortcut as normal, but once you land you drift to the left, trick onto the wall, then trick onto the platform, then trick as far to the left as possible into the chocolate, using a mushroom as you land and then attaching to the yellow rail to fix your alignment for the final part of the lap. This entire sequence is of course pretty difficult, but attaching to the rail at the end after pulling all this off is the trickiest part. It is all pretty cool though, so I'm just including the whole thing for this video. Moo Moo Meadows has the infamous tree bounce shortcut, which is very easy to do when using a mushroom, but doing it without a mushroom like in the world record is incredibly hard. Tricking at the right time on the grass is fairly difficult in itself, but the charge jump is so hard. Almost every time I released a charge jump, I didn't go high enough and would just hit the fence head first. I did eventually sort of manage it, but it was genuinely one of the hardest ones in the entire video to pull off for me. In the world record, Kinso does it on all 3 laps, which makes the run incredibly impressive to me, especially since on lap 1 you only get 2 coins when taking the optimal lines, making it even harder to pull off. Bones Burnout doesn't have anything quite as difficult as that, but there is still a relatively hard shortcut here. When you land from the glider, you can then charge jump onto a candle to cut off some of the next turn, setting you up for the ending sequence over the lava lakes. This isn't awfully hard to do, but it isn't totally easy. Gathering the charge jump can be quite annoying, and then tricking high enough to get over the rail is fairly hard. Attaching to the rail by accident is a very easy mistake to make. You can definitely get used to this one, but it's still a worthy inclusion in the video. The mushroom shortcut on Boo Cinema at world record level is very difficult. Attaching to the wall can go wrong so easily. On almost all of my attempts at it, I would just get stuck in the hole in the wall. You have to land in such a specific spot to get up to the rail. Whenever I did get onto the rail, I would then get slowed down loads by the fences, but if you use the world record combo, that issue seems to disappear. Once again, this isn't amongst the top tier of difficult shortcuts, but it can be frustrating to do 3 times in one run. For Dandelion Depths, I was originally going to include the pole bounce at the start of lap 2 and 3, but a few days ago, Optic found a new shortcut on the track that changes the cave section entirely. Here it is in full. Yeah, I couldn't believe it either. You can get up to the top path fast enough to make it worthwhile, and then drive on the left side of the fences in the water section for the tightest lines possible. The narrow charge jump near the end looks really tricky to get. You don't have much space to work with and need to get a good landing for the final jump onto the floating barrier. All in all, this track has now become really interesting. Optic has found a great shortcut here for sure. Cheap Cheap Falls has several different shortcuts, the most obvious one being the Tarzan shortcut in the middle of the track. However, the hardest one to pull off here is probably the rail version of the first shortcut. It is just kind of random whether it works or not for me. This is probably because the alignment is very precise, so I don't notice it when I do it slightly wrong, but that just highlights the difficulty of this one. Sometimes you can sort of attach but then get the weirdest physics of all time, and whenever that happens you lose quite a lot of time. Great Question Block Ruins has an easy choice. The wall ride on the S-bend is so much harder than anything else on the track, especially the fastest version where you get a low trick as you get back onto the road. This wall is so thin, you have almost no margin for error as you approach it. Your alignment has to be almost perfect every time. The trick timing at the end is also really hard to get right. Once again, there is such little leeway. Luckily, you can still carry on driving if you trick too late, it just loses a bit of time, but if you trick too early, you'll end up flying off the tracks to the left. Similarly to Moo Moo Meadows, I find it incredibly impressive recent world records have had this wall ride on all 3 laps. Being able to do this shortcut whilst also doing a fast box cut at the end is amazing. Dino Jungle doesn't really have any shortcuts in the world record I can talk about, since there is only really the wall ride cut and the mushroom spot, both of which are extremely easy. So instead, I'm showing you the shroomless version of the ending cut, which is faster than going around, but not by much. However, it is pretty difficult. It is very common for your drift to cancel if you don't take the correct lines or release your super mini turbo at the right time. There is also a cool different version of this shortcut that is done on lap 2 of the shroomless world record, where you charge jump into the 2 back legs of the dinosaur. It is probably just as hard as the regular shroomless cut, but it does rely on the dinosaur being in the right place. The hardest shortcut on Salty Speedway is also not used in the world record because it is a shroomless version of the ending rail shortcut. If you don't have any mushrooms at the end of lap 1, you can use the blue pole to climb high on the wall and attach to the rail at the end, which isn't too hard to do with a bit of practice. However, if you try the same thing on lap 2, the blue pole will probably not be there, so you can no longer use it to get up to the rail. This pole only respawns if you go wide at the first long turn of the track, which of course is not what you want to do when driving the track fast. So, what you can do instead is charge jump directly onto the wall and reach the rail from there, which seems like it would be fairly simple to do. This is not the case at all though. I find this to be the most random shortcut in the game, and most of the time you'll end up just not reaching the rail at all. I don't understand why this only works occasionally. I would never be going for it online, but in theory it is the fastest way to drive the ending without a mushroom, so it makes it into the video. Peach Beach has nothing all that interesting to talk about as always, but the Section 3 charge jump shortcut onto the rail is definitely the hardest one on the track. Getting onto the rail is a bit dodgy sometimes, but it isn't too bad. Nothing else really to say here. Farway Oasis, however, has a very difficult shortcut. The water bounce over the grass turn is insanely hard to pull off optimally. Wrapping around the wall and then not losing any speed when you land in the grass is so difficult to do. The world record holder James says this cut is miles harder than anything else on the track, but in fairness he is trying to get it perfect every single time. If you are happy with getting a mediocre version of this cut, it isn't too bad if you trick off the bottom of the pole and shake trick in the water. You should get enough height to make it over the grass. Koopa Beach has an obvious pick. The new shroomless shortcut over the boxes in the world record is very difficult. Aligning yourself to charge jump off the side of the small ramp is hard on its own, but getting enough height from it to land on the left wall is even more difficult. The trick before the yellow ramp has to be perfect so you can get a boosted charge jump in the right direction without having to wiggle. You have to just commit to the line and hope you got the alignment correct, otherwise you won't reach the wall. The hardest shortcut on Wario Shipyard is simply the world record mushroom shortcut. Getting the correct alignment over the rock is actually harder than it looks, plus you can easily miss the pole trick itself if you aren't careful. I wouldn't say it's amongst the hardest shortcuts in the game, but it is very failable when time trialing the track, especially because lag 2 can be quite annoying if you land on the rock slightly too far to the left. Skyhigh Sunday also doesn't have anything insanely hard, but the charge jump version of the ending wall ride is a standout on the track. To put it simply, you have to try and land as early as possible after charge jumping, so you can trick onto the very bottom of the wall. The lower you can get, the faster, which of course has the risk of going too low and just missing the wall ride entirely. Another easy mistake is to land on the road rather than the top of the wall if you hold right slightly too early, but that isn't a terrible way to fail since you can still do the wall ride regularly afterwards. Starview Peak's wall ride shortcut is on a wall just as thin, maybe even thinner than the Great Question Block Ruins wall, but this time the trick back off the wall is fairly simple. It is still incredibly difficult to attach to it though, especially if you do a charge jump just before it like in the world record. It is easy to overshoot the fence on the landing as well, but that isn't really a major issue. The wall ride is the obvious difficult part of this shortcut. DK Pass never really had an incredibly difficult shortcut until very recently, as something really cool was discovered not too long ago. After the second wall ride, you would normally just go around the next turn without doing anything special. However, now on lap 1, the world record holder Mikkel does this. Yep, you can climb onto the inside rail, then trick to the left to basically skip the wrench, which I've been told is a sub-frame perfect trick, or in other words, is insanely hard to time right. Like Bowser's Castle, this is only currently done 1 out of 3 times in the world record because of how difficult this left trick timing is, but I'm sure one day there will be someone crazy enough to go for it 2 or 3 times in a run, and they will be rewarded with a very nice time save if they pull it off. Now for Airship Fortress, I've quite literally always used the final turn shortcut in every shortcut video I've ever done, but just for the sake of breaking that streak, I'm going to allow myself to say the right trick at the end of the red rail, because that is easily harder than the ending despite it not really being a shortcut. This right trick just gets you onto the ground earlier and aligns you better for the next turn, but the timing for it is very tricky. The only other thing to mention is to make sure not to try this when the rocky wrench is up, otherwise you'll be driving straight into its face. Wario Stadium's hardest shortcut is a lap 1 exclusive because it sets you up for the coin rail, which of course you avoid on lap 2 and 3 thanks to the Vela shortcut. This involves riding up the right wall after the rail jump, then tricking onto the barrier and getting a very small wall bounce like on Choco Mountain, aligning you perfectly for the coin route. As is the case for most shortcuts in the video, the timing here is very precise. If you go too early, lag 2 will pick you up, and if you go too late, your alignment will be completely ruined. Definitely one you do not want to be trying online, and to be fair, it is not essential to learn for time trials unless you're pushing for a really strong time. Guy Bazaar has one of the easiest shortcuts in the video. The U-turn charge jump along with the sequence beforehand is the hardest thing to pull off on the track, but most decent players will be able to do this almost every time, so there isn't really much to say here. Desert Hills has a similar shortcut to Wario Stadium, but this time you get a mini wall bounce before landing on the barrier, which is even more difficult. Currently, the world record does this only on lap 3 despite it being faster on all 3 laps, once again showing how difficult it is to pull off. It is yet another sub-frame perfect trick, so when someone eventually gets it all 3 laps, it will be one of the best runs in the game for sure. Now for DK Spaceport, there are 2 fairly close ones. The world record holder Optic said that the really early horizontal pole trick shortcut was probably the most difficult for people to learn, but the final shroomless shortcut turn on section 6 is very close behind it, so let's just include both. For the first one, you make the gap jump and then get 2 tricks in quick succession off the rail and off the pole to reach the wall, which gets you onto the glider path much faster than driving on the road normally. For the second one, you have to get 3 rapid fire tricks on the very edge of the grass shortcut, then ride the wall until you can get a super mini turbo trick off it. This one is of course at the end of a run, so you get less practice on it and the pressure is higher to make it, so the difficulty does probably even out for these 2 shortcuts, both of them being very impressive of course. Whistle Stop Summit is a crazy track in time trials. I was half tempted to just put the first 2 seconds of the run into the video and call it a day, but I decided that didn't fully qualify, and the alternative is really hard to pull off anyway. Getting an optimal gap cut after using a mushroom through the grass is really difficult, because you have to land on the very edge of the road in order to instantly turn to the left so you can immediately attach to the rail. It is very easy to just entirely miss the road when going for this one, since you don't get the luxury of a super mini turbo to carry you over. Your charge jump timing has to be perfect. The hardest shortcut on Crown City is another one yet to be implemented into world records because it involves a very dodgy box bounce. Take a look. If you can't tell, bouncing off the box in the right place and at the right angle after doing 2 pole bounces is so tough to do. But if you get it perfectly, then it can be used to save time over the world record. The extra mushroom you save by doing this can be used on the glider instead, and together it is faster than just using the mushroom in the grass. This means it will one day be used in the world record, but it will likely take a lot of attempts for whoever goes for it. And finally, on Mario Bros Circuit, there is coincidentally another ridiculously hard box bounce shortcut, but luckily this one will probably never have to be used in world records because it is a shroomless version of the ending cut, which is still a lot faster to just use a mushroom for. However, if you don't have any mushrooms, then this is technically the fastest way to drive the ending, but once again it is so hard to do. The trick off the rail is actually fairly simple, you just charge jump into it and shake trick. But to land on the box in the correct way to then get onto the yellow rail is just absurd. I have never been able to replicate it after Optic first showed it to me 6 months ago. It is for sure one of the hardest tricks in the game to pull off. And that is every track done. Be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching.